was only meant to be a game. A quick game, he promised his mother, and they wouldn't be far. Couldn't ever go too far from the house, in case they needed to run. But they did need to run. He needed to run. His brother was always a faster runner, and in this case, being faster might have saved his brother's life. Bertie felt like a flower, pressed and preserved between the thick pages of a heavy hardcover book, pressed flat for the purpose of display, to be shown off and kept exactly as is, instead of growing and thriving like a plant should. The smoke and fog and noise made what little they could see around them into a haze of greys and blacks. An emptied ashtray over his eyes and ears. He didn't know what building was currently on top of him. He didn't think it mattered too much, but as this city was his home for the past 9 years, he couldn't help but wonder how much of his home was left. It wouldn't matter much now. The pressure on his back and legs was intense to the point of numbing. He couldn't move, and he was certain he'd never move again. Never run again. But his brother could run. His brother got out, ran right into the warden's arms. He'd be safe. He'd be alive for a little longer.
As will you, kiddo. You aren't dying yet.
Bertie's train of thought pulled to an emergency stop just inches away from the devastating abyss of oblivion he was heading for. While pinned beneath the rubble, his arms and upper chest left free but weighed down by the ash and pain, Bertie couldn't look up enough to see who was speaking to him. But he could see in front of him a pair of boots. Black, heavy boots, adorned with rainbow laces. The navy-clad legs attached to these boots soon crouched down, folding and crossing themselves. Bertie just barely managed to look up at a frowning young man, clad in blue and holding an open umbrella. The canopy wasn't for the rain. It was for the rest of the fallout that remained in the air, falling helplessly. The umbrella seemed to cast a shade of calm over the trapped adolescent, his eyes stinging a little less as he looked up at the blurred image of this stranger. He could make out dark, tanned skin, the thick black shape of his glasses that framed dark, inquisitive eyes.
Get out! They're still falling, sir. The shelter isn't far, it's too late for me.
Adada. Less of that. You're still alive. That is enough hope for me to work with.
The frown slowly peaked into a little smile as the man looked up at the heavy, lumpy duvet of brick and concrete that was pulled haphazardly over Bertie's short frame. With fiddly hands, the man unscrewed and removed the pale wooden handle of his umbrella, shoving the metal pole of the canopy into the concrete where he was kneeling. The handleless brolly stood proudly, shielding the exposed parts of Bertie's body and head. The rainbow lace boots moved away from his sight as the man, rolling his sleeves, began to lift the bits of rubble bit by bit.
Leave me, sir!
Bertie cried out, his stinging eyes frantically looking up in a vain effort to watch the skies, hunting for any sign of the enemy's plane or one of their bombs. This stranger was an idiot if he thought he could free him before the next one fell. And there was always the next one.
The next one won't fall for another 5 minutes. I'm making those 5 minutes count.
Sir, how do you...
Know what you're thinking?
The figure in blue grunted and heaved, his tanned brown hands greyed with the remnants of the rubble that he insisted on lifting and throwing.
I can hear you, kid. Simple, really.
Bertie frowned, remaining limp as his head and eyes weakly attempted to move to keep this figure in his sights. The fog seemed to settle and clear, revealing the dull grey mountains of ash and concrete where houses and shops and lives used to be. Amongst this ocean of destruction and noise, the gentleman in blue seemed to stick out like a beacon, even with his tweed coat and navy trousers coated with debris. A vivid dark blue shape stood stubbornly against an ashen grey world. In a turn so seemingly impossible that he almost convinced himself he was dreaming or hallucinating, Bertie began to feel the weight on his legs and back slowly shift and lighten as the figure in blue moved quicker and quicker back and forth from the rubble he was beneath to the increasingly growing pile of bricks and concrete a few feet away. Without the weight to pin him down, Bertie could feel the sensation slowly start to return, starting with pain. A strangled cry escaped the boy's lips as he felt his vision start to blur. The world around him became hazy and unfocused as the blue gentleman became the only vaguely discernible sight amongst the chaos, before the pain and the chaos caused him to drift into the comfort of unconsciousness. He thought about his brother, thought about mother and father, the three of them huddled in a shelter, perhaps with neighbours and familiar friendly faces. His family, safe and alive, that mattered most of all. In truth, he wasn't entirely expecting his eyes to open afterward, and he definitely wasn't expecting to see the face of his brother staring down with tear-stained eyes and a smile bright with reignited hope. His father and mother cradled him close, delicately as if afraid to shatter him further. The pain in his back and legs was somehow lessened to a dull, bruised ache, his ash-covered frame wrapped up in a heavy blanket. The weight, unlike the rubble, comforted rather than consumed. His head, swimming with crumbled concrete and confusion, could just barely make out where he and his family were. They had managed to all gather in an underground train tunnel, the sound and impact of the chaos above causing tremors all along the claustrophobic tube as dust showered down on the rest of the survivors huddled in amongst their family and friends. By rights, Bertie shouldn't be here. He was almost certain that all of this was perhaps one big comforting hallucination, a desperate grasp at some hope and peace from a dying brain before rubble and a lack of oxygen snuffed the light out from him. He received a crumb of mild confirmation when, through his blurred, hazy vision, he saw the oddly comforting sight of a figure in blue, with black glasses, barely noticed amongst the other panicked survivors. He could just make out the man raising a finger to his lips, just barely able to make out the smile on his tanned face, before he turned and walked down the tunnel, unnoticed by the others. Bertie didn't talk about what happened. After that day, and after the war, he had chosen to keep the story of his Samaritan close to the chest. He doubted anyone would question it. That time was full of people doing outrageously heroic or reckless things. It takes a crisis to make a man, as his father always said. He did see that man in blue one more time though, before he passed away. It was only in passing, mind you, a yearly trip to the city, the old brick buildings replaced by sleek, imposing towers and modern cafes he never truly took to. He had gotten the train there, the journey practically second nature despite his somewhat failing memory. Bertie sat at the cafe with a cup of coffee and a ham and cheese sandwich, his walking cane resting on the chair where his brother would have sat before he passed on. He was always the faster one, of course, even when it came to seeing their parents in paradise. The cheeky sod. The absence didn't hurt as much anymore. Bertie was in his 80s now, with a family of his own, and a son deep within the messy throes of discovering himself. Bertie pondered about bringing the lad with him to this spot, but he doubted that the sentiment and the meaning of this journey would be understood. His son lived in a world of his own, one far removed from Bertie's experience as a wean. He sipped his coffee, his movement slow as he tried to ease the tremble in his hand. It wasn't just the arthritis that caused it, this time. It was where he was sitting. Even now, after years of rebuilding and a new cafe being unceremoniously plonked down in the spot, Bertie knew that he was sitting on the exact spot he was pinned under decades ago. There was almost something sickeningly humorous about having an afternoon lunch, sitting in the place you nearly died as a child. But he supposed there was something oddly fitting and almost rebellious about it. His own way of blowing raspberries at the Grim Reaper.
You didn't get me, Mr. Reaper. You have to wait your turn. Ha ha!
As he munched on his sandwich, quietly replaying the memory of his accident, while the ambience of beeping cars and passing commuters kept him mostly grounded to the present, another sound seemed to interrupt the flow. A wheezing, roaring sound, like an ancient engine or keys being dragged up and down a piano wire. He didn't pay too much heed to it. Until he noticed the police box, now stood on the opposite street to him. Now, Bertie was fairly certain that box wasn't there before. Failing memory aside, he knew that those old concrete, or maybe wooden, phone booths were all but decommissioned, knocked down by the advancement of police radio and faster automobiles. He would have noticed a large blue box on that street immediately, but the box itself wasn't what caught his attention. Truth be told, it was almost difficult to keep focus on it, as if his eyes were being constantly warned to look past it or to not acknowledge its existence. It was who stumbled out of it. A young, short fella in an oversized black frock coat and green shirt, his black hair messy, his dark eyes darting around rapidly as if searching for something. Even from this distance, with his weak eyes, Bertie could recognize his Samaritan immediately. Bertie watched as the man stumbled across the road, on shaky, hesitant legs clad in denim and anchored by black boots that also seemed to not quite fit the person wearing them. He kept silent as the tanned face and slanted eyes he so vividly remembered looking at him with a comforting reassurance now were filled with an anxiousness and uncertainty. As the stranger's hand pushed open the cafe door and he shuffled in, Bertie took a moment to process what he'd just seen. There's no way on God's green earth that could have been the same man. No way at all. It was decades ago, for crying out loud. That Samaritan of his would be 100 by now, probably passed on long ago. He debated walking in, approaching the scared young fella and asking if he remembered him, but a gentle wheezing noise echoed in his mind as he glanced back at the blue police box on the street corner. A vivid, dark blue shape stood stubbornly against an ashen grey world. A fault pushed open the door of his mind, walking in with a tad more confidence than the man in black.
Leave him be, Albert. Their story has just begun.
It wasn't quite Bertie's own voice. It was softer, a gentle Celtic, potentially Irish lilt that seemed to soothe the confusing cocktail of emotions the old man currently felt. But somehow, Bertie understood. He didn't know how, and admittedly, Bertie chalked most of it up to his faith in the higher power. The logistics of it all eluded Bertie, as it would anyone. But he just knew it. Same face, same inquisitive eyes, just without that blue coat or those rainbow-laced boots. Part of him wondered if it was just his old brain imagining things, but he could almost hear through the window that same posh voice that comforted him all those years ago, now sadly lamenting that he was missing his old accent. The context eluded Bertie, but one thought managed to settle comfortably in his mind as he remembered a soft English voice, a tailored tweed coat, and a gentle smile amongst the haze of lifeless grey.
I'm sure he'll grow into it.